The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around a subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject matter. Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Things We All Carry. Today I'm joined by Kevin. Kevin's a volunteer from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. He sheds a different light on mental health from a volunteer's perspective. I first learned of Kevin through the Objectionables page on Instagram. He was a weekly contributor to a couple of challenges I would hold. Late this winter, I was in Maryland with a friend for a Whiskey Myers show. Sitting in a bar passing time before the show, I get a message. It reads, "Hey brother, if you're around, there's a ticket waiting for you at Will Call." Turns out we were at the same spot in the same place at the same time. And I moved my pregame to the spot where Kevin and his twin brother were hanging out. We talked for a bit and then went on to enjoy the concert. It was a pleasure getting to know Kevin some, and we've stayed in touch since. A quick reminder to please help us build a community which not only recognizes but supports each other through the struggles and recovery. Reach out through Instagram at The Things We All Carry or email mystory@thethingsweallcarry.com to offer support and share your story. Please remember to leave a review on iTunes and give a shout out to any first responder you know, love, or care about. Enjoy the show. We don't have to wait till the end because on Instagram you're at the unpaid professional, correct?
Yes, at the unpaid professional. Yep.
All right, so let's go ahead and get this thing going and we'll talk. You ready?
I'm ready.
This evening we're sitting down with Kevin. He's coming to us from Maryland. He is a volunteer. Kevin, how long have you been a volunteer?
12 years.
So there you go. You hear it for yourself. He's been a volunteer for 12 years. He works a full-time job on the outside. He's a family man. And I'd like to give him a chance to give you some of his history and introduce himself. We'll let him talk about some family stuff and some professional stuff. And then we will break into his story and what he's doing in his life now. So the mic's yours.
All right. Thanks, Dak. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm happy to share my story with you and just hope that it helps someone out there to not feel alone. You know?
Yeah, that's definitely the goal, is to connect with other people so other people realize what's going on.
Exactly. There's too many people that think they're going through things alone, or that their traumas are unique, but everyone struggles, and I don't want anybody to feel like, career or volunteer, that the things you're going through or the feelings they're feeling, they're the only ones who've ever felt that way, because they're not. You know?
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your family? I know that you're close to your family and you live where you live because of your family.
Correct. Yeah, mom and dad, they celebrated 50 years last year of marriage, so still together and very supportive of myself and my twin brother growing up. Afforded me a lot of opportunities that I wouldn't have had they not worked as hard as they did to support my brother and I. And luckily was able to go to college and got my degree and came back home and started making a life here on the shore. So I got into the volunteer service at 25, which is late for most volleys. Most guys here that volunteer start as a cadet and work up. But as you'll find out there, I moved back and was kind of looking for a sense of purpose and a feeling of community. And the volunteer service allowed me to do that. And I've continued to do that. And I feel like through our service, we're able to give back to our communities and help those around us. And at the heart of it, I think all of us career volunteer, just want to help people. We're helpers.
Yeah, we're all definitely helpers and we all think we can fix it.
Yes. That's it. We're helpers, fixers. A lot of volunteers have skills, and I'm sure prior to entering career service, a lot of the career guys had skilled jobs, whether it be carpenter or welder or what have you. So we're working with our hands, and we're trying to fix things, and I feel like that innately we bring that fixer aspect into the fire service.
I just, I'm going to digress here a little bit because I just had this conversation at work yesterday. We do have a number of people that had skilled jobs, and I think any job is really skilled, to be honest with you. But they had
Mm.
the trades,
Mm.
and then we have a couple. We've had rookies come in that have no experience, no life experience, no job experience, and you're able to kind of mold them the way you want to mold them. And then there's a subset I think as well because I didn't have a trade, but I worked with kids and adults with autism, so I worked with people. And so, in a sense, I was still trying to be a fixer. I just didn't fix with my hands. I just fixed with these kids and these families. So it's a very interesting point. I like that you made it.
And look, hats off to you. My wife's a special ed teacher, and she deals with a lot of kids, be it all across the spectrum, but she's got a couple that are definitely on the autism spectrum. And look, dealing with people is still a skill. Whether it be people with disabilities or just people in daily life. And from working with those with autism and on those things, that how quickly they can escalate. So our calmness and the way we handle and conduct ourselves is even more important. You know?
I agree with that completely. All right. So, where were you about your family history?
So no, mom and dad still married happily, and I'm fortunate in that regard that they're here for me and my wife, and they're just an awesome resource. I can't thank them enough for that. Have really no outlying traumatic family events or anything. Very loving and supportive family, and we all have our little quirks, but overall, I'm blessed. My brother, twin brother, is also in the fire service. We joined together in 2009 at the volunteers, and he's since works for a paid department. Both of us being in the fire service together has also been helpful because we are able to be there for each other and understand each other. So automatically having someone to navigate tough calls and thoughts and feelings with is definitely helpful. And he's my ace in the hole in that regard.
Tell me a
So
little bit about your town you live in because I know that plays a part in your fire service.
we are small town, 896 people roughly. I think our population is roughly the same size it was in the 1800s. I hate to say the cliche, one's born and one dies, but we're about the same. We're about 25 minutes from everywhere, from larger cities, and it's turned into a bedroom community. It was once a shipbuilding, agrarian economy, and now we're a bedroom community in that regard, and just a nice, quiet place to live down by the water.
How did you find, well, excuse me, before we get into that, because I was going to discuss the fact that how long your family's been in the area, because I think we talked about that last time.
Yep, yep. So there's records of people in my family being in this area all the way back into the 1860s, and we verified that through historical documents. And map makers put out an atlas of landowners of the area. It was published out of Philadelphia, and we've got a hard copy of that. And it was astounding to be able to find that and trace that lineage on back.
You said you went to college. What year did you go to college?
I graduated in 2007, with a bachelor's degree in communication and a minor in business admin.
So where do you go after you graduate college?
I moved back to the shore and substitute taught for a little while, and ended up landing a job with a local beverage distributor in middle management. And I started there in 2008, and I substitute taught for 3 or 4 months and ended up landing that job. And yep, while I was working there is when I got into the fire service.
Okay, so let's jump into that. How did you find yourself into the fire service?
So December 23rd of 2009, I was there at my house, and I was getting ready to go to work and was coming to the end of a road in my relationship with my longtime girlfriend at the time, high school sweetheart type thing, and thought we were going to settle down and get married together. And that came to an end. And the Christmas tree went out the front door with me, and Christmas got canceled that year.
So you left the house and took the Christmas tree with you?
Drug it right down the stairs.
Okay.
And probably not one of my shining moments, but that's how it went down. And we had been trying to put lipstick on the pig, so to speak, and it just wasn't working out. And it came to the point where someone had to pull the trigger, and it was that day it was me. I don't think she was capable of it, and I was just like, I've had enough. Yeah. And then my fire service parallel with that day was that evening, late in the evening, there was a little girl in the area that was abducted by a acquaintance of the aunt, and this was all just found out later, of course, that Christmas Eve, law enforcement kind of searched and was going on leads. And Christmas Day 2009, they put out a call for volunteers to look for this young girl. And I don't know if you've ever seen thousands of people at a stadium lined up to go do a search for a missing kid, but it's pretty powerful. You could definitely feel a desperate hope in that crowd of all the people who had pretty much said, it's not about me today. It's about finding this little girl and trying to bring her home. And we went out and did a area search. I was wearing chest waders, walking through ditches and through briars, and we were desperately looking to find this underage female. And we searched everywhere. And when we cleared our grid, I was like, man, I don't know what to do, because we didn't find any sign, and ended up going back to the staging area. And I found a sheriff's deputy that I knew, and actually got up on the mobile command post and was trying to talk him into letting me go out again with another group, trying to find another grid that hadn't been searched. And they tapped us on the shoulder, hey, look, we're going to suspend the civilian search, and we're just going to go ahead and keep it to law enforcement and fire. And okay, my brother and I were walking out and saw some guys that we knew that were local, and they were all there with the fire department. And they said, hey, where are you guys going? I said, we're sending the civilians home, and today you're with us. And it hit me like, wow, like I've known these guys all my life, but they're taking us in. So we literally go in and stage with them. And it was at that point that we stood around for probably 20 minutes, BSing and waiting. And they called it. They said, we've got one area we're going to send just the law enforcement back out to. And they ended up finding her. And knowing what I know now and the condition she was found, I'm glad that we didn't find her that way. She had been raped and set on fire while she was still alive. When they located her, they determined that postmortem through autopsy.
That's a hell of a thing to take in.
It was, and not so much through, anything. I walked through the woods, but I feel bad for the guys who had to find her in that state. It was heavy, and it was powerfully moving to see so many people there from all over, and dogs and four-wheelers and ATVs, and I think probably the three closest air assets in the air, hovering, looking, and powerful, to say the least. Yeah, I say air assets. There's at least one Maryland State Police chopper and at least one DSP trooper unit. Actually, I think they had both of them out there. So it was a lot, man. It was intense. It was, and of course, then what do you do when it's over? She's been located. Now what? You go home. And that's how you spend the rest of your Christmas day. Just thinking about it. And me, newly alone, I can't even remember what I did after that. Because after that, it didn't really matter, to be honest. That was the vibe of the day. There's no eggnog that's going to pop you back from that. Yeah, that was Christmas in 2009. And after that, my brother and I looked at each other. Man, what do you think about the fire department? And he called me, I think, and he's like, hey, man, I was thinking. And he was like, hey, I've been thinking too. And it was almost like we almost finished the sentence for each other. Yeah, let's do it. And so applied and was accepted, voted in, and went through, got pump operator training in firefighter 1, 2, hazmat, you know, technical, high angle and vehicle rescue, instructor 1, EMR, all those, classes, of course, going through, of course, while running calls and learning with my station and training with the guys. And it was exactly what I needed. The fire service was exactly what I needed at that time to give me a sense of purpose and belonging at a point in my life where I really felt like, besides going in and putting in time for the company I was working for, I was wondering, I felt like I didn't have a purpose, and it's shaped my life thus far. Because it's a lot. You're able to be called anytime you're available and trap family dinners or birthday parties or, dinner with the wife to go and serve others. And I mean, for me, I think of the ability to serve our community and the neighboring community. To me, that's an honor to be entrusted with that.
So how long was all the training for you?
So the training is done through MIFRE, Maryland Fire Rescue Institute. Firefighter 1 in Maryland is 120 hours, or was when I went through it. And then Firefighter 2 is an additional, I can't remember the course requirement. So it's done nights, weekends. And of course, you get that certification through MIFRE, which you can then take on and go ahead and have certifications for your classes. But that's how the training is done. So, and MIFRE has training sites throughout Maryland, burn buildings, all the things you would see at a training site. It's just nights and weekends instead of an academy style.
Okay, so that's your training, 2009. When does that finish for you? When are you a functioning member of the company?
So once I got my firefighter 1, I was able to go ahead and actually do more than support activities. And then, of course, as the class comes available, you could take it and you build onto that cert. I'm trying to remember when I took, and I'm almost ashamed to say it, I'm trying to remember the end date of the last class I took, but you can always add on those certifications and add on more certifications. So, the first class I got was Fire 1. Then you take Fire 2, you take Pump Operator. I had CDOs already coming in. So actually, I think the first class I took was Pump Operator. Yeah, because I already had CDOs. And my justification to the chief I took it was, hey, I may not be able to go in there yet, but I know how to drive that, and I want to know how to get water for you guys. That way we can do that. And again, any way I could, just to help. And then Fire 1, Fire 2, rescue tech for vehicle machinery, hazmat, awareness and operations level, and just continue to go on as the class becomes available. It's set up like a college schedule because it's administered out of College Park. The volunteer service is different in the regard that you have to make the time to take the class and the schedule. I took leave time with the job I was working initially to actually even be able to get my certs and to be able to do the live burns on the weekends and stuff like that, because my work hours included weekend hours.
That's quite a commitment.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about your time at the volunteer house. How does that progress?
Really, volunteers as needed. So my joke with our newly hired medic was, there are two speeds here. It's bullshit or it's oh shit. That's a lot. And it's said in jest, but it's true. We joke in a small town, but either it is, and I hate to lessen anything by saying BS or mundane, but it's it's a run of the mill. It's a medical, or holy crap, she's getting ready to respiratory arrest, or oh wow, that's a minor auto accident. It's a fender bender. Or, oh wow, that's a rollover with partial ejection, or, that's a working fire. There's not a lot of in between here.
So quite a bit of feast or famine.
Yeah. When it's on, and you know it, and you almost have to, you got to be ready for it all the time. Not that anyone's not ever ready for it, but it's got to be right there in the back of your mind. Hey, don't sleep on this, because we may get here and it may be totally different than what dispatch is portraying. And I mean, I feel like all of us are in that regard, but you better be ready, because you may have mutual aid coming from a ways out. You may have you may not have staffing. You don't have a guaranteed staffing level. So you may have 3 guys on the engine, or you could have 3 rigs rolling full. It just depends on time of day and work schedules and who's around.
And I know you identified some calls that you wanted to talk about and how they affected you. And so why don't we just talk about some of those calls for right now?
And we had talked about the glass analogy, and I'll talk about how that came up. But these calls I highlight not to try and highlight my service or go look at the things this guy's seen. These were the things in my glass when I realized that my glass was starting to overflow. And I'm very thankful, and I'm very fortunate to have been given that analogy, and to be able to take that and use that as a tool for my own introspection and analysis, and saying, hey, where am I at? The first call I remembered sticking out in my time came in 2010. So I hadn't been in real long. It was reported as a single non-breathing. And we happened to have fire department fundraiser softball tournament going on. Most of the guys were all together in 2.5 blocks from the station. And this call comes out. A friend of mine who's a paramedic, and we jump right in my truck, and we start heading up the street towards a firehouse. And I looked at him. I said, do you want to get the rig, or do you want to go direct to the scene? And he said, no, when you stop at the stop sign, my friend was in the back. He said, he'll hop out, he'll grab the ammo. He said, you and I go. So we roll in, pull up, just past the address, and in the yard, there's a 40-year-old girl, approximately 4. And the words I hear her saying standing in the front yard is, "Mommy won't wake up." And so make our way into the house and get upstairs and find female patient laying on the bed, and she's gray, but she's warm. And our medic starts immediately, pulls her from the bed down to the floor and starts doing chest compressions. And our first thought was CO. Yeah, we're not thinking at this time of opioids or anything like that, or prescriptions or anything like that. First thing I did was crank a window open, and there was probably a 90-pound Labrador wandering around upstairs, and I grabbed him. I locked the dog in the bathroom. And about that time, our on-duty paramedic arrived from the station on the ambulance with my buddy who had grabbed it. And they checked one of the back bedrooms downstairs and found a second unresponsive patient, adult male. And they hollered, hey, we've got another one, and swap compressions and just keep working them. And out of that, the male subject lived. The female didn't. We were unable to get her back. And it ended up being a prescription overdose. And that was 2010. You figure the opioid crisis here, that was the first time it became a reality. And that 4-year-old girl in the yard, I don't think I'll ever forget her face, or just her little voice saying, "Mommy won't wake up. Mommy won't wake up." And that was because I had a cousin who was battling those demons at the time. And I remember very vividly after that call, just thinking, I hope that that's not something that I have to deal with for him. And one of the things in the fire service that one of my instructors told me very early on, and I laughed it off, you will respond for people as a volunteer, and even as paid, but more so in a volunteer service where you're serving where you live. And that was the first one that I was like, man, that stuck with me. And it lingered,
And I think that's why I specifically asked about where you lived, because that does affect you. And that's exactly what I was referencing, is the fact that because you're so entrenched in the area, you have those connections and you have the knowledge of people, and there is a higher risk that you're going to run somebody that you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you have to be able to provide that same level of service and then process the personal end later as, I won't say cold, but it's a reality, because at that point, even though those people are known to you, they need you for every skill that you've ever picked up just to that point. They're counting on you. Yeah, definitely. Definitely that's reality hit home there. And then kind of the second event that's been an impact for me was February 26, 2011. The person I considered my mentor in the fire service was killed in a motor vehicle accident that actually our department got called to respond to. And just, he was one of those guys, if you had a problem, he knew it when you walked in the door. And he's like, man, talk to me, what's up? And joining the fire service where I did and the point I was in my life, he helped me a ton. I'm not ashamed to say it. I had some suicidal thoughts in my dark time, and it was his words that kept me from ending it. And when that call came in, I was getting ready to go to work, and we had kind of a rash of false alarms and being canceled on the response from that jurisdiction. And I was like, oh man, it's another BS call. It's another BS call that we're going to end up getting canceled on. And I remember squelching the pager, and it was an old minute or two, and I hit the button on the top and squelched it and went back to sleep, or tried to, and ended up getting ready, going into the office and getting my guys ready and getting them going. And probably about 7 o'clock in the morning there, so it was about 2.5 hours after initial call, my phone rings. And it's the girl I'm dating at the time, my wife now. And she said, are you sitting down? And I just remember thinking, yeah, I'm walking to my truck. What's up? I'm getting ready to go out and hit the road. And I've got customer visits and things like that I have to make. And she said, that call this morning, she said, it was Rick. And I was like, my knees buckled, and I cried on my knees in that parking lot for probably 2.5 minutes. And I got myself together and walked in the office, and our division manager happened to be there, which was odd. And he could tell immediately that something was wrong. And he said, what's going on? And I told him a friend of mine had been killed. And he said, go ahead and split up what you were going to do today and just go ahead and take the rest of the day. And I got in my vehicle and went home and crawled up the stairs to my apartment. And just the emotion that hit me, like walking in that I was going to have to see her, and knowing that she had just made one of the toughest phone calls that she had ever made, I'm sure. That was hard. And then the next 10 days were a blur until we got him laid to rest. And the guilt about having not responded. Yeah, I remember that I came home and changed clothes and got up to the station, and walking into the firehouse and hearing the sound of your brother sobbing in different corners of the firehouse. That's a hard one. That's a hard one. And then I have and will carry the guilt that's I never got to tell him that he saved my life. That is one that I carry and always will. I was able to tell his father. He and I are close, and I see him often, and I just try and impress upon him what a gift his son was to me and what he meant to me as a friend. And he meant a lot to everybody in our department. He was an outstanding leader and a good friend. And we miss him very much. We still gather on the 26th of February every year.
So when trying to frame this question correctly, in a career department, when something like that happens, they at least give lip service and they give a hot wash, as they like to call it. And you give people the chance to talk. Not everybody talks, but what's it look like for a volunteer unit when something like that happens, or when something like the 4-year-old saying, "Mommy won't wake up"? Is there an opportunity for that, or do you share lives?
We have our chief, God love him. He's been pretty proactive in that incident, and as well as the other traumatic incidents, as far as having the critical incident stress management team come in and these people they're people you don't know. They're not members of your department. They're at fire service, EMS, or I don't think any of them were law enforcement, and they all, have gone through the citizen training, and yeah, they shut us down. We had mutual aid coverage. Our mutual aid station that we run a lot with there, they were here probably, they were here before lunchtime. It was like they threw a crew of guys together and got over here and they shut us down. And guys were, sweeping and cleaning and trying to keep our hands busy. Because if our hands were moving and we had something in front of us, then we weren't necessarily thinking. Maybe we were. It was just doing a task, having something to do, felt at that time. And luckily, those guys came and were just like, "Go wait for the CISM team. Like we got this." And every department that came in was absolutely outstanding. And the CISM team let us all talk and share things about our brother we were thinking, that we were feeling. And everyone was able to speak and share. And it was a wonderful tool at that time, especially having not had anything like that go on. And I think after that, we've been more able to use the CISM team and feel like, it's a viable resource for us. So and that's appreciated from everyone. That's the feeling that I get anyway. I don't get anyone that's ever walked out of a CISM briefing or debrief, whatever you want to call it, and said, "Man, that was horse crap." Like anyone who's felt generally and shared genuinely, I feel like it's helped. And we all continue to be there for each other, but that CISM team really just lets everyone pour out that raw emotion right then.
I think something you said in there is key, and I want to talk about it. It's not, I don't necessarily think it's the format, it's the CISM itself. I think it's what you said. It's they share honestly and openly. And
Correct.
I think that's the key. And that or therein lies the issue, because you don't always get that when people want to do a debrief, a CISM or a hot wash. You don't always get that openness. And I think that's what we want to encourage.
Definitely. And I think that our ability to have that openness and to utilize that tool comes with our own ability to own our thoughts, feelings, and emotions.
Oh, definitely. It's all a process, obviously, and we all need to learn how to do it. I damn well need to learn myself how to do it still. So I agree with that.
And it's about being in tune and going, am I avoiding this, or am I just maybe me sharing, like us sharing our stories with you? I hope it motivates someone else to say, you know what, even if I don't go on a podcast and talk about these things, maybe I share it with someone else. And by sharing it, we own that, and we're able to accept it and cope and move on. No different than speaking with a therapist or any other mental health professional, because until saying, when you say it, you have to own it. That's the tough part. It's owning that I feel this way, or this made me feel this way.
I think
So,
ownership is tough, but in many cases, I think identifying that feeling is tough.
absolutely.
So I know there's another call. It was, I believe, July of 2012.
Yeah. Yeah. July 2012. Being on the East Coast, you know what summers are like, and hot, humid days. And
Yeah, just nasty.
yeah. And you feel like you could wring the air out. And it was one of those kind of days. And we got called. We do have a Marine component in the dive team. We got called to help in what we knew ultimately would end up being a recovery of 3 boys swimming in the creek. And one went in, they all were swimming, and one had trouble, and unfortunately, they all tried to save each other, and everyone unfortunately perished. And so we came in with our dive team and set up across this it's a creek at that point. It's narrow, but it ends up widening out further downstream. And we set up right by the closure, still on the ground, but everything was still right there. And we literally put a ladder down in for the guys to walk down into the water and setting our line up. And one of the divers kicked back to seat his fins and adjust them. And the last missing young man floated up and just about hugged him, arms out, face down. And so 2012, I'm not a diver. I'm not a member of that unit, but I was on shore support, and we lowered the Stokes basket down in to get him out. And as we're pulling him up, he's so little, he starts to slide out. And I was at the foot, and I had to set the foot down and grab his ankles to keep him from sliding back down the bank towards the body of water. And when I did, I grabbed his ankles and feeling that warm, gone skin, and I instinctively just looked down in his eyes, and just the look of terror on his face. It was something I definitely won't forget. And I learned my lesson that day about drowning victims and not looking in their eyes. Just the look on his eyes and his face was not peaceful. And that one, he came back probably a month later. When I say he came back, I was at a fundraiser, and it was a ride that was running, and there was a little boy on the ride, and he's saying, "Mommy, look at me," but I'm not seeing him. I ended up seeing the face of the young man who passed away on him, and I just remember thinking, "Wow, it's odd." That one came back. Like, none of the calls, the previous ones I had mentioned, that really stuck with me, but this one, for me to see his face again, it had never happened before. And I was like, "Oh wow, that's odd." That was the first red flag, and I didn't pursue it any farther. I was just like, kind of, maybe this is normal. Maybe this happens. Deep down inside, knowing it wasn't normal, but not really having a frame of reference was, just packed it up and kept moving on. And 2012, October 2012, my dad and my brother got CO poisoning and responded to that. Neighboring departments called, of course, going down. We were having a hurricane at that time. I can't remember which one it was, named storm, that affected the area heavily with a lot of flooding. And my father had a generator running, and he thought he had it ventilated well enough, and went to check on it, and my dad went down. My brother was able to get him out before he then went down. And I ended up responding into that and finding my dad and my brother, in the house waiting for the ambulance. The neighbor had heard my brother hollering for help, and his wife at the time had heard him holler for help through the storm. I don't know how, but they were able to get him into the house and go ahead and call 911 and get him there. And it's real, man. You pull up at the place you grew up, and you have so many happy memories, and you're responding there for your loved ones. And once we got them loaded, I looked at the chief at the time. I was actually riding with two departments. In this neighboring department, I was riding with them as well. I looked at him. I'm like, "Hey, give me a bottle." I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "Give me a bottle. I need to go in there and shut this down, and we need to go in there and get CO readings. Let's go. Let's go to work." And we were able to get those readings, and then I went on, met him over at the hospital.
And again, that goes back to what we talked about earlier with the fact that you're volunteering in your community, and that's where your family lives.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I know that from talking to you that this story ends well because your brother and your father both recover. But
they went. Yeah.
But that still takes a toll because A, you responded to him, and B, the what if.
Oh, absolutely. I remember distinctly. My brother was he was in the ER, and being a provider himself, he was being critical of the staff there. And I just remember feeling like, "Man, what are you doing?" So I walked out and I grabbed the charge nurse, and I looked at him and I said, "Hey, based on his CO levels that we sent to you over the radio, how much longer?" He said, what? I said, how much longer did he have before he was out too? He said, 5 minutes, maybe. And just the relationship that my brother and I have cut right to the chase with each other. And I remember looking at him, I remember going, hey, asshole, what would you do with 5 more minutes? And he said, what? I said, nurse says that's about how long you got. So calm down and think about your 5 minutes. And he dialed it back from 10 to about 7. But yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah, 7's still pretty much an asshole level.
mhm.
And I'll say that just because I met your brother.
Yeah, and he's not always that way. I apologize for that, but yeah, he's
No, no, you don't have to apologize for him at all.
yeah. But yeah, yeah. So definitely responding in the area you live definitely gives you a different kind of appreciation for the people in your area and your service to it. And for me, ultimately, the gratitude to be able to do it. I'm fortunate in that regard that I am able to help those around me. And not to get off track, but it goes to we're talking about my uncle, who was a non-vet and served with the Army Security Agency in support of MACV, which was Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, and SOG. The guys who were going into Cambodia and Laos as a radio operator for them shortly before he died. He and I were, just talking in his yard, and he looked at me and he said, I don't envy you. I said, why is that? He said, my war ended when I left Vietnam. Yours is every day. You never know. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, what? For a guy that I had always held in such regard, to say that to me was humbling. And as I looked at it more, he's right. For first responders, our war it's every day. Not to downplay or lessen the military service in any regard, but we just don't know. And if you don't think about it in that regard and stay mindful that there will be things that kind of creep back in, then you can quickly find that glass overflowing.
So I know we're going to talk about that glass because I think that glass it's a powerful analogy. I believe there was one more thing you wanted to talk about, and I think it happened in 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Yeah, this is the one that kind of helped me see that my glass was getting fuller, or filled my glass up to that point. March of 2015, we get called. The dispatch here calls it out for ALS assist. So we know they need a paramedic. And that was one of those nights where you just have a night where sometimes you're like, man, I'm on edge. I don't know why. I can't sleep. I'm up. I was cleaning my refrigerator. I was taking everything out of my refrigerator at 2 o'clock in the morning and cleaning it deep clean, just like it was 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. And the call comes out for mutual aid medical. And so we get to the station and roll out on the medic unit and heading down a backcountry road and not really seeing anything, checking for addresses. And I remember getting close and being like, oh man, all the houses are dark here and we must be getting close. And sure enough, you pull up and there's a pole that's cut off, and we can see that. And it's arcing, that blue, just electric blue transformer arc. And it's scenes going from just the headlights and then kind of the ambo lights, this really bright, intense blue light. And we hop out and start walking up. And I remember seeing a car that from the front looks fine. And I'm like, okay, why are we here? This seems mundane. And as I come around the front of the car, the first thing I saw was the B pillar. And there's probably 8 to 12 inches of intrusion on that B pillar. And I remember seeing blood down the side of the car, and gray matter. What I found out later was gray matter. And that's the first time that I heard our female, she's going, is she dead? Is she dead? And I look up and I see her standing next to a law enforcement officer, and he's got one man in handcuffs. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Look to the right, and there's 3 more teenagers separated in a different group. And I find the mutual aid ambulance crew there over on the other side, the guys who had called for us for ALS. And they're standing by the side of the road, and I'm the first one that walked up, and they said, "Can you pronounce?" And I turned around and pointed at the medic. I said, "No, I can't, but he can." And as he walks over, they rolled the sheet back, and her head was just absolutely smashed. And we found out later that her head had been between the pole and the B pillar, as best we can figure, with these 6 kids riding in a car. She was sitting on her best friend's lap, and the best friend was the female who was standing next to the law enforcement officer. And her chorus of "Help my friend" changed to "Is she dead? Is she dead? Is she dead? Is she dead?" And when our medic pronounced it, just crying, screaming, just absolute pandemonium. And when that happens, I noticed that she is covered in blood from her waist down, where her friend had slid down underneath the driver's seat and her head had been in her lap. And we loaded her and transported her. Today we would call it excited delirium in our protocols, but transported her to the hospital, and just so she could get some help and some intervention there. And that was a 27-minute transport time, as we're a little farther out from the hospital. And that course of, "Oh my God," and "Help my friend," and "I can't believe she's gone," definitely continued the entire time. You couldn't have shot a better Prime Promise video. Like, if someone had told me about it, I said, "Nah, man, you're lying. That's something that would be staged." Nah, that was it. And I just remember getting back from the hospital and sitting there with one of the EMTs who had went with us, and sitting on the bumper of the engine. And I said, "Man, you going home?" He goes, "Nah, I'm gonna wait for sunrise and wait for my daughter to get up." And we just sat there together on the engine, and just, what do you do after that? You know?
I think what he said was perfect. No, I'm gonna wait for sunrise. I'm gonna wait for till my daughter wakes up.
Yeah, because his daughter was about that same age. Again, you find a lot of personal connections, even sometimes unintentionally, in these calls that we run, that kind of give it meaning for you. And I just remember all that next day, we went to a fundraiser for another department, and there were drinks and beer and all you could eat beef and everything else. I just remember wandering through that day. And that night we came home, and I didn't even drink. I didn't want a beer. Like, I tried one, and I'm like, nah, I can't even. I just was not in the mood for that. And I sat and I sat, and I'm like, there's no way I can sleep. I can't process this. Wasn't thinking of hurting myself or anything like that. I couldn't process it. And I pulled out my phone, and I just Googled first responder help and 800 safe call. I found them, and I looked at the number for a while, and I'm just like, is this going to help? Are these people going to tell me just to suck it up and move on, or what's going to happen? And I'm like, you know what? Forget it. I'm calling. And I called and spoke with a lady from Washington State. She was, at the time, she had retired law enforcement and had 25 years on the job. And she said, "Kevin, your glass is full." And that hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, I thought I was packing stuff up in the neat little boxes, but in reality, my glass was just filling up. And my glass is my own, your glass is your own. And everyone's glass is different. And that's the call that thing just started to overflow. And I think we talked for 2.5 hours and talked about the little boy and my mentor. And that glass has been a huge gift to me, in being mindful of my glass and processing my thoughts, feelings, and emotion has allowed me to continue on and to continue to serve my people here and allow me to be viable and give back to my community. And I can't imagine not being able to do that. So I'm extremely grateful to those people for what they do. It, I'm sad I can't remember her name, so I could give her credit for giving me that gift. But I really, if she hears this, I appreciate you. I do.
Let's talk about that for a second, because you said that the glass, they teach you about the glass, and they teach you that it's full and that anything you add to it is going to spill over, correct?
Correct.
Okay, you learn that, but what do you do with it at that point?
So for me, in processing mine, it's really been about where am I at? How am I feeling? And like we spoke about before, if I'm not honest with myself about how I'm feeling and where I'm at, then I'm not going to be able to truly gauge where my glass is. You know, it's thinking about and truly owning that and how it makes you feel, so you don't just pour it in the glass and let it overflow. And for me, it's also been about finding outlets to pour my glass out. For me, yeah, my mindfulness, introspection, speaking with trusted friends, other guys in the department, and having that openness and relationship to say, hey, man, I got one that's bothering me. Like, this is bothering me. Writing, hunting, fishing. And if one really stuck me up, I've got a niece, and my father-in-law is a mental health professional and a psychiatrist, and I have a close enough relationship with him that I feel if I said, hey, I need to talk, that he would talk with me until he felt comfortable and refer me to someone or another resource to help me continue on. I don't know when the one will come that will say, hey, maybe I need counseling, maybe I need to get that. I've not had any formal counseling, and that's not to say I won't. I'm not opposed to it. I think I, like many other people, thought I could handle it on my own. I'm this strong, tough guy, and I can handle this. And there's a time for machismo, and there's a time for being real and honest. And when we realize that firemen aren't made of iron and the ladders aren't made of wood anymore, then we can move forward and make sure everyone's okay and able to go out there and to continue to help our people, because that's what we're here to do.
So we also talked about the impacts. When you and I talked on the phone, we talked about what the impacts were on you and your life. So out of these calls and these other things you've seen, what have the impacts been?
At times, I found myself sometimes definitely dark humor. I don't think there's anyone in fire EMS that doesn't have kind of that dark sense of humor. I think it's one of the things that we all pick up, at least for myself. Normalizing death, sometimes I feel the things we see have made me not immune to it, but death becomes a more normal thing when sometimes we can't save anybody. We're just the witness to the end. And that feeling of just being the witness, it makes it easy to, at least in my eyes, normalize that. Sometimes lashing out, being angry, little things setting you off that let you slide the dial to 10. And if we're not mindful of those impacts, then your glass is going to overflow. Just think of it as pouring water into that glass off of a 24-foot ladder. And instead of flowing gently into the glass like you held it to our impacts magnify that drop in the glass. And I feel like the longer I go without allowing myself to process where I'm at, the higher up that ladder I get. Yeah.
Where are we today?
Today, for me, I'm probably 6, 7.
How are you dealing with things today?
I know that I need to just take some time for me. Got it planned for Sunday. That's the day I'm going to shoot for. And I'm going to go out and I'm just going to enjoy being on my boat and being thankful for the things that I have, my family, my life, and just enjoying the things around me. I put up a post the other day that I was driving and I had to go get something from the store, and it was like the most mundane thing. It's like this huge inconvenience. I'm going down the road and I'm looking to the west, and I just see the sunset, and I'm like, man, that right there. That's it. I know where I need to go. I've got a front spot out here on the river where I keep my boat, and just went down. And as corny as it sounds, brother, I went down and watched the sunset. And that's a place where I've always felt safe and peaceful. And being right there and just being in that moment and silencing everything else changed the total rest of the course of my day. And for me, forcing myself to just get out there and be in that place and in that moment and silence everything else is one of my most powerful tools.
You say that's corny. Just yesterday morning before I started shift, everybody was gathered behind the rigs, and instead of me going and talking to everybody, I noticed that the sunrise was coming, and it was actually for where we are. It was a beautiful sunrise, so I went out there and I took some pictures, and I enjoyed that for a second before I went in and met up with the crew. So I don't think that's corny at all.
And for me, just that couple minutes there of solitude and just peace. And you could see the reflection of the clouds and the sunset on the water, and everything was still. And I'm like, man, this is just, it changed the course of my day. All the other stuff that I had going on, all the other noise that was happening in my brain, I just shut it off and just allowed myself to be in that moment and to just be thankful for being here.
Yeah, it quiets it and it brings you a little bit of peace.
That's it.
Do you see any therapists today?
I am not, no,
Okay.
not seeing anyone currently.
But you don't feel the need to, I'm assuming.
No, no. And if I felt the need to, I feel confident saying I would reach out and make that call, having made that call before. If I felt like I needed a more, I'm going to say, strenuous, but a more in-depth help, I feel like I could make that.
I think that's powerful because it's for you, then there's already a recognition of when you need it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's key for the rest of us. I can only speak for myself. It took me years to say, okay, I need it. But now that I know I need it, I know I need it. And so I am seeing a therapist, and it does help. So I appreciate the fact that you're aware enough.
And I'm glad you're taking that step. It's important. We need you. We need me. We need everybody else out there listening to be good, because if we can't help ourselves, how are we going to be able to help the people who are calling us for service?
That might be the perfect place to wrap that up right there. If we can't help ourselves, how do we help others? And we started this whole conversation. You started off with stating we help. That's what we do.
And I hope this helps anyone who hears it.
All right. You know the questions I'm about to ask you.
I do.
What do we call the show? The things we all carry. And one of the reasons I call it that is because we all carry something into a call. Whatever tool it is, whatever bag it is, whatever it is we carry into a call, be it a fire, be it a medical call. But we also carry something out because each call leaves a mark on us, some large, some small, some you don't even notice for a while until your glass fills up, as you said. So what's an everyday carry for you outside of the fire department?
For me, ever since I've got it, I've been wearing my Skulls for Hope bracelet. If you're not, I know you're aware, but if the listeners out there aren't aware of Skulls for Hope and the things that they're doing, I highly encourage you to look into them and support them. It's a reminder for me. The skull on it, it obviously reminds me of the things we've seen, but it also reminds me that in that there's hope. And a lot of times we're that hope for those that we're called to serve. And I got to be there. I got to be good for it.
And Robert from Skulls of Hope was a guest of mine on one of the earlier podcasts. And in that podcast, he explains where he got the idea for the skull and what it means. And you can find that on episode 2 of the show. So he was one of the first ones to actually speak to me. So I will link to that. I will link to his website in the show notes. Give me a book. What's a book do you want to suggest to people?
For anyone who is considering the volunteer fire service or just helping their community, one of the first books that I found that even had to do with it was Population 485 by Michael Perry. And this isn't a fire service text. It's not Brannigan on building construction. It's not Report from Engine Company 2 or 82 or Rescue Men or anything like that, anything else that I'm seeing here on my bookcase. But yeah, it's the true and pretty honest story of a guy who was a volunteer in New Auburn, Wisconsin, and among doing the things he was doing and was volunteering, and it brings it into a small town reference frame. And I always admired how he put the book, and for me, I would recommend that to anyone who's thinking about it.
Again, that's something I will link to in the show notes, and it'll be available, and people can take a look at it, read it. And that's exactly why I asked for the book, because I want to get these resources out to people so they can learn from them. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And not to self plug, but I am on Instagram. I do post under the Unpaid Professional, and if anyone wants to follow me there, you're more than welcome to. Try to be positive and encouraging and uplifting for the fire service, and encourage volunteers to not be less than just because they're not being compensated with money for what they're doing in most cases. So encouraging guys to give their best and do their best for their community. That's what I'm doing there.
Perfect. So like you said, it's Instagram at The Unpaid Professional. And I'll
Yes, sir.
try and link that into the show notes as well, so possibly people can give you a follow or even reach out to you and ask you some questions if they need to.
That would be great.
I appreciate your time, Kevin. I know that we've run into each other at a concert, and we've talked to each other off and on throughout the time since then. And I appreciate all the time that we've spent together, and especially tonight. So thank you very much.
Stack, thank you. And look, anytime, man. Hit me up anytime.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com, for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.